the libs don't seem to think that political activism is useless. They seem to think it's very useful, and they've achieved a lot because of it.
Well, I'm personally an accelerationist, so I'd like to see where things are going to go because I can only assume that the dating market is going to get worse and worse, and that's going to probably cause people to harbor some sort of resentment, and it's going to have a lot of like intergender issues. Again, I hope this doesn't happen, but that's just kind of what I speculate will occur.
Well, hold on. Because when you say you're an accelerationist, I find that very interesting. Accelerationism meaning, look, we got all these social problems and they're getting even worse. And so you know what? Let's just immanentize the eschaton. Let's bring it up to the end, let it all fall apart, and then we can finally rebuild something good.
Yeah.
But so you say I'm an accelerationist on the one hand, but you say I don't want that to happen on the other. Or that's a contradiction.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about the resentment. I'm not talking about.
But that's part of the acceleration is like we all go to war with each other and everything.
Well, just because I want that to happen doesn't mean I really have a lot of hope that the two genders like have a lot of conflict. But I hope that we can accelerate to the point where we could start to rebuild the society and the dating market because it's only going to slip further and further. I think the conservative movement, to a large degree, is a complete joke. And I would say that
for a long time, I agree with that.
I would say that now it's probably stronger than it was a few years ago, but largely a joke.
You should have seen it before Trump.
Yeah.
You should have seen it before Trump. Man,
so if, the stuff that I'm talking about really doesn't have, I would say it's probably more of a right-wing thing in theory, but there's really no political party attached to it. And if it is the right that's supposed to be, protecting us from slipping into this degeneracy that we're talking about.
No, we're in the degeneracy. There's no protecting us from slipping. We've been in the degeneracy for a long
going
time.
Further, and if that's the right's job, I don't really have a lot of hope. That's why I'm someone who's saying, yeah, individualism is good. Adapt to the society that we live in because that's the highest chance of success.
Adapt to this, but hold on. You're saying the society is getting more degenerate.
Mm-hmm.
Adapt to the society.
Mm-hmm.
But also don't be degenerate. You see the conflict between those things.
Who's saying don't be?
You're saying to be degenerate.
I'm just saying it's what you're talking about degeneracy and the hypergamy stuff. It's not ideal, but I'm saying that's just how it is.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I misunderstood your point. So you're saying, look, the conservative movement has had all these failures, totally agree, and we've fallen into this degenerate society, and that sucks, totally agree.
But that's just how it is.
But then your answer is, so, if you can't beat them, join them, basically.
Essentially, yeah.
It's kind of doomer.
Well, is it? I mean, really, it just seems like such a cope to be going to all these political action events as your average guy. Maybe you have this perspective because you've got your own show and you've got a lot more influence over the way that the country goes than just your average guy. But if you're just one of the average viewers who's got no voice, who could risk potentially losing their job for saying the wrong thing in politics, I'm saying that they shouldn't really be concerning themselves with trying to change the tide of society.
Well, look, people have a voice in as much as they vote. They have more of a voice than ever because of social media and new media.
Until they get banned and fired from their jobs.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. And then we stopped a lot of that. I mean, Elon helped stop that when he bought Twitter.
Still happens.
But it happens to some degree. It's gotten a lot better. And I guess my point is, if this individualism and political quietism from the right is what led us into this mess in the first place, because it emboldened and empowered the left to screw up the whole society from dating elsewhere, then wouldn't doing more of the same only make things worse?
Well, was it really individualism that caused the huge decline in the right? I'm just talking about from a self-improvement perspective and just overall context of how you should live your life as a man. And maybe you're right about that, but I just don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to just advocate for your average person to only concern themselves with their
Yeah,
own.
to me, that's the big cope. I agree with many of the observations you're making about the society, but the big cope. You heard this with like the libs when they were trying to push the trans stuff, and they were upset that some of us were pushing against it. And they said, "How does this affect you?" You know, you're walking out. It's basically your society is Sodom and Gomorrah, and they say, "Well, how does it affect you if I decide I want to like castrate little kids in the school and redefine marriage and slaughter babies and sacrifice them to Moloch? And how does that affect you? You just mind your own business." And I think, how about I don't mind my own business? How about my business is my community, and I have a right to enforce standards and norms that are good and traditional and conducive to flourishing? And how about you mind your own business?
But the problem is, you see what you just did there is you spiked your cortisol thinking about transgenders.
Will that max anything on me?
No, that's a very catabolic hormone. So if you're advocating for people to, go around and, concern themselves with these issues, or go to, like school, like board conferences, and like, be outspoken about this, that's just largely going to be unproductive. And, it might seem like a doomer mentality, or like, you're just going to let society go to it's like on an individual level, it's not going to be productive.
But on a political, right. Well, look, it's been productive in as much as, at least the trans thing, there's so many other problems.
Well,
at least the trans things, though, we've kind of won on that.
Well, the way that I see trannies is like, that's one more person to mug once they brutally butcher themselves transitioning,
But is it, I see that.
Like, go descend yourself. Like, that's fine with me.
Because you're ascending yourself.
Yeah, I'm going to ascend, and this person is going to be a comical botch job, you know? So, like, that just seems like very logical to me. Like, yeah, go be a tranny. Like, now I mog you to death.
Now, yes, I see it. Isn't that a bit cruel to the, like, for instance, my view of the tranny, people think I want to commit a genocide on the trannies. In fact, media outlets have written that, which is totally ridiculous. My opposition to the transgender ideology is that I think it's false, it's bad for everyone involved, and at a very real level, I love trannies. That's the part that's going to get clipped. But I love the trannies in the sense that they're my countrymen, they're fellow human beings, they're children of God. I don't want them to do things that are bad for them. I don't want to like spike the football or spike my cortisol and just mog all over them. I want them to live lives that are good and flourishing. And so I also don't want them to scandalize whole generations of kids into thinking they can be the opposite sex and screw up my society further. So there's a little bit of a selfish aspect, but there's a common good view, and there's even charity for the other person. Don't we have to have charity for these other people, even if they're descended trannies?
No, not necessarily. Think about all the time that you've spent throughout your entire life talking about trannies. What if you were to dedicate all that time to bone smashing? Imagine where you could have been.